Welcome back everyone. Today, we're continuing with the next part of this series, called What If Goku Remembered the Saiyans? My name is Ash. Please, for me, drop a like and subscribe to the page. Also leave your comments down below. With that, let's begin. Bardock, Krillin, Tien, and Bulma landed softly in the middle of a quiet Namekian village, the dusty ground crunching underfoot. As the ship's door slid open, Bulma quickly pulled out her radar, eyes fixed on the small, blinking dot. "The radar says the Dragon Ball is somewhere here," Bulma said, tapping at the screen as her son gently set her down beside him. Krillin squinted, scanning the peaceful scene before him. "Well, I guess we should ask the locals, right?" he suggested, adjusting his posture. Just as the words left his mouth, 3 elder Namekians appeared from the village huts, their robes fluttering in the wind. The one in the middle stepped forward, his wrinkled face calm yet guarded. "I am Elder Muri," he introduced himself, his voice steady. "What brings you to our village?" Bardock didn't waste time with formalities. "We're here for a Dragon Ball," he said bluntly. Muri's face remained still, though his eyes sharpened slightly. "And what do you need a Dragon Ball for?" he asked, his tone cautious. Tien stepped forward, folding his arms across his chest. "We're trying to wish our friends back to life. They were killed when some bad guys attacked our home planet," he explained, his voice heavy with seriousness. Muri's gaze softened slightly, and he nodded. "We understand your pain," he said. "We've had similar problems ourselves." Before anyone could respond, the air around them grew tense as all the warriors present felt the sudden, violent flicker of energy signatures vanishing in the distance. Tien and Bardock exchanged grim looks. "They're exterminating the villages," one of the other Namekian elders muttered, his voice shaking. "We still don't know who they are or what they want, but none of our warriors have been able to stop them." Bulma glanced down at the radar again, her face going pale. "They're after the Dragon Balls," she said, a sudden realization dawning on her. "They're probably going from village to village, killing anyone who doesn't tell them where the Dragon Balls are." Krillin clenched his fists, anger flickering in his eyes. "We can't let them gather all the Dragon Balls," he said firmly. Bardock nodded. "They're likely using scouters to locate the villages," he said. "We should hide this Dragon Ball somewhere they can't find it." Muri frowned deeply, his voice filled with concern. "And how does that help my people?" he asked. "They will just continue their slaughter until they get what they want." Bulma took a step forward, holding up the radar for everyone to see. "They've already collected 5 of the Dragon Balls," she said, her voice shaky. "The one here is the closest to their location." Krillin's expression darkened as he glanced around the village. "Then, they'll be heading this way soon. Do you have any warriors?" Tien asked, stepping toward Muri. "We have 3 warriors in this village," Muri said. Bulma looked around nervously. "We need to evacuate the village and hide the Dragon Ball," she said quickly. Bardock, however, seemed unconvinced. He shook his head. "If they're using scouters to track the villages, they'll just follow us. I think we need to make a stand here," he said, crossing his arms, determination etched across his face. Krillin looked at him incredulously. "Have you felt how strong these guys are? We won't stand much of a chance fighting them head on," he said, his voice rising in disbelief. Bardock's eyes narrowed. "But we can't just let this village get wiped out," he shot back. "With the warriors here, we might actually have a chance." Krillin sighed and shook his head. "Can you sense any powers strong enough to beat what's coming?" he asked, a hint of desperation creeping into his voice. Bardock closed his eyes for a moment, extending his senses across the village. After a few seconds, he opened his eyes. "No," he admitted, his voice grim. "The strongest power I can feel here is probably around 3,000. Just then, Tien's eyes flicked to the east, and he frowned. "Wait, there's another strong energy coming from the east," he said. "It's way stronger than the others." Muri nodded slowly. "That would be near Guru's place," he said, his voice thoughtful. Krillin perked up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Is this Guru guy strong?" he asked. "He is the elder of all our people," Muri said with reverence, "but his guardian, Nail, is the strongest Namekian we have." Krillin quickly put the pieces together. "Then we should hide the Dragon Ball somewhere, evacuate the village, and make our stand at Guru's place," he said, a plan forming in his mind. But Muri shook his head, his expression firm. "We cannot lead them to Guru," he said. "We must protect the father of our people above all else." Bardock's eyes hardened with resolve. "I'll go see if this Nail will help us," he said. "In the meantime, we need to stall those enemies and hide the villagers until my dad and Raditz get here." "Take the Dragon Ball with you," Muri instructed, his voice carrying the weight of authority and concern. He looked over at a young Namekian boy who stood with a serious expression. Dende, you will guide these warriors to Guru's place. Make sure they arrive safely. The boy, Dende, nodded quickly. Yes, Elder, he replied, stepping forward with a hint of nervousness but determination in his eyes. Bulma, her eyes glued to the dragon radar, spoke up. Make sure you find a place to hide the Dragon Ball along the way. If they're using scouters to track it, they'll struggle to locate it as long as it's not in a village. Bardock crossed his arms and nodded. Got it. I'll be back as soon as I can, he said, his eyes narrowing with determination. Krillin, who had been silently thinking, suddenly spoke up. Wait, Bardock, take your mom with you. If we fail here, at least they won't get their hands on the dragon radar. Tien added in agreement. Yeah, it'll be safer with Guru than staying here. Bardock hesitated for a moment, but then glanced over at Bulma, who was already gearing up to leave. Fine, but make sure you guys hold them off. Krillin turned back to Mori, a serious look on his face. You and your people should evacuate this area. It's too dangerous to stay here. Mori's eyes darkened with worry. They'll just keep hunting us down until they get the Dragon Ball, he replied, voice low. Krillin smiled slightly, an idea forming in his mind. Exactly, he said. That's why Bardock should leave the Dragon Ball here, for now. Dende looked confused and glanced at Krillin. But what if they find it? Krillin shook his head. Bardock and Dende will just make sure to get the Dragon Ball from Guru and hide it. We'll deal with this one. Bardock's eyes flicked between Krillin and the elder Namekian, but there was no time to debate. All right, he said at last. Let's move. Meanwhile, far away from the village, Captain Ginyu stood in the middle of a demolished Namekian settlement, a smirk tugging at his lips. He admired the trail of destruction they had left behind. This was the 5th village they'd torn apart, and they had claimed a Dragon Ball from each one. His scouter beeped, and he tapped it. Captain Ginyu, he answered. A familiar voice crackled through the device, icy and commanding. Captain Ginyu, Frieza's voice echoed. How goes my Dragon Ball hunt? Very well, Lord Frieza, Ginyu replied with pride. We have already collected 5 Dragon Balls, and we've captured Vegeta as you requested. Excellent, Frieza purred, satisfaction dripping from his words. I will be landing shortly. Bring me my 5 Dragon Balls and the prisoner. The remaining 2 should pose no problem for your men. As you wish, my lord, Ginyu said, ending the transmission with a grin. He looked around at his squad. You heard the boss, let's move. Back at the village, Krillin and Tien lay flat on their stomachs at the edge of a cliff, overlooking the Namekian homes. Both had their power levels suppressed to near zero, the air tense with the knowledge of what was coming. They're getting close, Krillin muttered under his breath, his eyes squinting as he focused on the distant energy signatures. I can feel them too, Tien replied, but it feels like only a few of them are heading this way. Krillin let out a small sigh of relief. Good, I didn't want to face them all at once anyway. Tien glanced over at him. Even so, if we don't take out their scouters, this plan's not going to work, he reminded him. They'll track us down. Krillin nodded, his face serious. We'll just have to do our best. Keep your power level low, and we'll hit them with surprise on our side. Both warriors braced themselves, knowing what was at stake. As Bardock, Bulma, and Dende traveled, they arrived at a tall spire, a strange house standing at its peak. The landscape spread out far below them, offering a stunning view of the surrounding area. Bulma took a deep breath and looked around. Wow, the view from here is incredible, she said, trying to lighten the mood despite the tension of their mission. Bardock wasn't interested in the scenery. His eyes were fixed on the strange building. So this is Guru's place? He asked, glancing down at Dende. Dende nodded, though his voice was quieter now. Yes, this is where Guru lives. Bulma noticed the boy's unease and smiled gently. Don't worry, kid. Krillin and Tien will do everything they can to protect your village. Just then, a figure emerged from the house, a tall, muscular Namekian with a stern expression. His presence was commanding, radiating strength and confidence. Who are you? The Namekian demanded, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the group. Nail! Dende called, running up to the warrior. It's me, Dende. Nail relaxed slightly, though his gaze remained sharp. Dende, what are you doing here? He asked. We came to ask for your help, Dende explained, looking up at him. Our village is under attack. People are dying. Nail's expression hardened. You know I have to stay here and protect Guru, he said, his voice firm. But Nail, Dende pleaded, our people will die if we don't do something. Nail hesitated for a moment, glancing toward the house. Finally, he nodded. I will take you to speak with Guru, he said, but I cannot leave his side. He turned and led them inside the house. As they entered, Bardock and Bulma's eyes widened. The room was small, but dominated by the presence of the largest Namekian they had ever seen. Guru sat on a throne, his immense figure towering over the others, his skin wrinkled with age and wisdom. You have come for the Dragon Ball, Guru said, his deep voice resonating through the room. Yes, Bulma confirmed, her eyes locked on the elder Namekian. We need to hide it from the evil ones, so they don't use it to make their wish. Guru's ancient eyes shifted from Bulma to Bardock. You also have a wish, he said, his deep voice filling the room. Bardock nodded. We do, he said solemnly. We want to wish back some of our friends who were killed. Guru sat in silence for a moment, considering their request. Very well, he said at last. Your motives are pure. You may take the Dragon Ball. Bardock gave a respectful bow. Thank you, sir, he said, grateful. Guru's gaze fell on Bardock, his expression changing as he leaned forward slightly. Now, step forward, boy, he instructed, his tone filled with a deeper meaning. Bardock hesitated for a moment, unsure of what Guru was about to do, but then stepped up, standing before the towering Namekian elder. Guru reached out a massive hand and gently placed it on Bardock's head, his fingers glowing faintly. You have great potential within you, Guru said, his voice soft but firm. Let's see if I can unlock some of it. Bardock's body stiffened as he felt a surge of energy coursing through him. His aura flared wildly, the power swelling inside his veins like a flood. He gasped, feeling stronger, faster, alive in a way he had never felt before. Whoa, Bardock exclaimed, clenching his fists as his power pulsed through him. His excitement quickly turned serious. I feel incredible, but we need to get back and help Krillin and Tien. They're fighting for their lives. Guru lifted a hand, motioning for patience. Wait, he said calmly. Dende, step forward. The young Namekian, looking both curious and a bit nervous, stepped up beside Bardock. Guru's gentle eyes fell on Denda. You are not a fighter, he said, his voice filled with warmth, but your talents lie elsewhere. He placed his hand on Dende's head, much like he had done with Bardock. A faint glow surrounded the boy, briefly lighting up the room before fading away. Denda blinked as the aura disappeared. What did you do? He asked softly. You possess the gift of healing, Guru said. I have unlocked this ability for you. Dende's eyes widened with wonder. Healing? He asked. Guru nodded. Yes, you can now use your power to heal others. It is a rare gift. Bardock looked over at Denda, impressed. That'll be useful. We'll need every bit of help we can get. Guru's gaze then shifted to Bulma. Now, step forward, young lady. Bulma looked startled, taking a step back. Me? But I'm not a fighter. I don't have any magic powers, she said, shaking her head slightly. Guru smiled kindly. But you do have gifts, he said, and I can unlock some of your hidden potential as well. With a deep breath, Bulma stepped forward and stood before Guru. She hesitated for only a second before allowing the giant Namekian to place his hand on her head. The same soft glow that had surrounded Bardock and Dende enveloped her. When Guru removed his hand, Bulma stood still for a moment, her eyes wide with realization. Thoughts swirled in her mind, ideas and solutions to problems she hadn't even thought of in years, all becoming clear in an instant. She felt like she could solve 100 different problems at once. Wow, she murmured, barely able to contain her shock. Far away, Captain Ginyu touched down outside of Frieza's massive spaceship, the 5 Dragon Balls floating behind him. Over his shoulder, he carried an unconscious Vegeta like a rag doll, the once proud Saiyan now reduced to a prisoner. One of Frieza's henchmen stood waiting, his face emotionless. Lord Frieza is very pleased with your progress, the henchman said. He's waiting for you in the throne room. Good, Ginyu replied, tossing Vegeta toward the soldier like he was garbage. Get this weakling out of my sight. The henchman caught Vegeta and nodded. I'll place him in a healing chamber immediately. Lord Frieza intends to interrogate him personally. At that, Ginyu flinched ever so slightly. Even he, despite his loyalty and strength, had to admit that the thought of Frieza's personal interrogations made him uneasy. Meanwhile, Jis, Berter, Rikum, and Guldo of the Ginyu force landed in yet another small Namekian village. The quiet huts and peaceful surroundings were in stark contrast to the destruction that was about to unfold. All right, Jis, the fiery-haired second in command, said as he surveyed the village with a smirk. Let's get the next Dragon Ball. I suppose we should ask nicely first. Birder, the tall, blue-skinned speedster, said with a sarcastic tone. Jees scoffed, rolling his eyes. Yeah, because that's worked out so well with the other villages, he said, clearly unimpressed. Rakum, the largest of the group, stretched lazily. I'm getting tired of all this talking. Let's just destroy everything and find the Dragon Ball already. It's more fun that way, he said with a chuckle. Their conversation was interrupted by a defiant voice. You won't take our Dragon Ball, Elder Mori said, stepping forward, his voice calm but firm. We know you're up to no good. Jees raised an eyebrow, his smile returning. Doesn't matter what you think, he said casually, flipping his long hair back. We're taking it, whether you like it or not. From behind Mori, a tall Namekian warrior stepped forward, 2 other fighters flanking him. No, you're not, the warrior said coldly, narrowing his eyes at the invaders. Without hesitation, the 3 Namekian warriors charged their energy and fired a series of blasts directly at the Ginyu force, each aiming for their scouters. Guldo and Rakum weren't quick enough, and their scouters exploded in a flash, shards of the devices flying in all directions. Birder, on the other hand, swatted the incoming blast aside with a lazy flick of his hand, unharmed. Jees glanced at the smoking remains of his comrades' scouters, his eyes narrowing. Well, this just got interesting. Nice try, Jees sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. His body blurred, phasing out of sight as he moved faster than the Namekian warriors could react. In an instant, Jees's fist pierced through the chest of one of the warriors, and the Namekian fell lifelessly to the ground. Another warrior found himself face to face with Birder, the towering blue fighter. Birder, quicker than a blink, rammed his fist through the Namekian's stomach, his expression barely changing as the warrior collapsed at his feet. Rakum, towering above the last Namekian, smirked darkly. Without a word, he gripped the warrior's head in his massive hands. A sickening crunch echoed through the air as he squeezed, crushing the Namekian's skull, sending a purple mess spilling onto the ground. Above them, Krillin watched in horror from the cliffside. The battle below had ended so quickly, far quicker than he'd anticipated. The Namekians hadn't even stood a chance. Panic surged through him, but he forced himself to stay calm. If they didn't act fast, more lives would be lost. We have to do something now, Krillin muttered, his mind racing. He turned to Tien. Take the Dragon Ball and go hide. Lower your power as much as possible. Tien's eyes narrowed. And what about you? He asked, his voice laced with concern. Krillin took a deep breath, steeling himself. I'm going to draw them away from the village. Then I'll try to lose them and hide, he said, determination in his voice. Without waiting for a reply, Krillin's body flared with energy, his red aura glowing brightly as he shouted, Kaioken X3. Without hesitation, Krillin shot down toward the village, landing between the Ginyu force and the surviving Namekians. His aura crackled around him as he faced the invaders. The Dragon Ball isn't here, Krillin blurted out. I already hit it. Jees raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Did you now? He asked with a sly grin. Maybe we should play with you a bit, see if you're willing to tell us where it is. Guldo's eyes gleamed with excitement. Can I handle this one? He asked, stepping forward eagerly. Jees shrugged. You sure you're up for it? He might not be as weak as he looks. Guldo chuckled. Oh, I'm sure. This guy looks like a pushover. Krillin didn't wait for more banter. You'll have to catch me first, he taunted, blasting off into the air in the opposite direction. Before he could get far, Guldo appeared right in front of him, his fist connecting hard with Krillin's face. Krillin skidded back, surprised by the speed of the blow, but barely fazed. How did you move so fast? Krillin muttered, shaking off the hit. Guldo grinned, enjoying Krillin's confusion. I can freeze time, he said with a smug laugh. Krillin started, but his words were cut off as Guldo's fist slammed into his stomach. The attack came out of nowhere, and Krillin hadn't even seen him move. Krillin grimaced, quickly raising a hand above his head. Destructo Disc, he yelled, forming a razor-sharp disc of energy in his palm and hurling it at Guldo. The attack whizzed through the air, but Guldo vanished, only to reappear behind Krillin in the blink of an eye. Another punch connected with Krillin's back, sending him stumbling forward. He whipped around, feeling frustration building. How is he so fast? With Kaioken X3, Krillin should have been running circles around this guy. Krillin launched a quick elbow backward, but hit nothing but air. Guldo had already moved, landing a swift kick to Krillin's face. The blow wasn't strong, but it was annoying enough to throw Krillin off. Krillin quickly adjusted, throwing a punch of his own. This time, Guldo wasn't fast enough to avoid it. The hit landed squarely in his stomach, and Guldo's eyes widened as the breath was knocked out of him. Seeing an opening, Krillin pressed forward, landing blow after blow. Guldo stumbled back, struggling to regain his balance. Without the ability to freeze time, he couldn't keep up with Krillin's speed. Guldo's breath came in ragged gasps. Without holding his breath to freeze time, he was completely outmatched. Another punch from Krillin slammed into his gut, leaving Guldo wheezing. Desperately, Guldo threw a wild punch, but it passed straight through one of Krillin's after images. Before Guldo could react, Krillin appeared behind him, cupping his hands to his side. "Kamehameha!" Krillin shouted, unleashing a powerful blue beam of energy that struck Guldo directly in the back. The force of the blast was too much for Guldo. The beam tore through his chest, disintegrating his heart and ending the fight instantly. Guldo's lifeless body crumpled to the ground. Jeese, watching the fight unfold, crossed his arms, a small smirk playing on his lips. "Not bad," he admitted. "You've got more fight in you than I expected." Rakum, who had been watching from the sidelines, grinned wide. "I want to fight him next," he said, cracking his knuckles. Jeese gave a casual wave. "All right, mate, he's all yours."